Uh, I'd like to thank T-Rex again. They've been hosting the Sustainability Lab since, when was that? Since May of 2017. And we were holding live events until the COVID pandemic started. And we've moved to virtual, and they've continued to host the lab by hosting these Zoom calls. So thanks again to T-Rex. So I'd like to get started now with our program for the day. I'm not going to read everybody's long bios. I hope that's okay with you, Lacey and Maggie, because I don't have them, but I'll introduce you. Lacey is the Director of Learning at ecochallenge.org, and Maggie McCoy is the Education Coordinator for the Earthway Center at Missouri Botanical Gardens. And they're going to talk to us today about resources for teaching sustainability in the time of COVID-19. So with that intro, I'll turn it over to Lacey and let her take it away.
Great, thanks, Aaron. Just gonna share my slides here. So thanks for joining us, everyone, today. We also will have part of our presentation is done by Allie Brown, who works in the Missouri Botanical Garden as well, and is an active member of the Biodiversity Working Group. She actually had a last-minute change in plans and can't be here, so we're sharing a video with her, and hopefully that works well. But as we all know, whether we're educators or parents or not, COVID has been extremely disruptive this year and continues to be disruptive, even when we had hoped that things would be getting back to normal. We are looking at a new normal, and for those of us who do have children in our lives that we're educating in some way, it's been really challenging. Those of us who haven't ever educated via online methods or in remotely, or have other jobs outside of educating our children, that's been really difficult, and we're anticipating a lot of those challenges again in the fall. So we're offering this session as a way to help you know a little bit more about what OneSTL offers as far as education for anyone in the community, but also particularly for children, and how you can get involved in the local sustainability initiatives that are happening here, and get connected with a lot of other organizations and people who care about these things. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about OneSTL and what it does, what the network is, and some of our own working groups and targets. And then Maggie will be able to show you some exercises and resources that connect to one of those targets with the Waste and Recycling Group. And Allie will be able to show you a couple of opportunities and activities that connect to the Biodiversity Working Group's target. So those are the two that we're highlighting today, but hopefully this will be useful and beneficial to everyone, and feel free to jump in if you have questions, but we'll also have time for questions at the end of the session as well. So as Aaron said, I'm Lacey Cagle. I'm the Director of Learning at ecochallenge.org, but today I'm presenting as one of the members of OneSTL Network. And OneSTL, briefly, is a collaboration of people and individuals and organizations that encourage and support greater sustainability across the 8-county St. Louis region. So we don't just work in the city, we work throughout the counties here too. And it's a dynamic network of organizations and individuals that share ideas, expertise, and resources to meet our regional sustainability goals. So OneSTL was actually created almost 10 years ago now as a collaboration between multiple organizations working on a grant to develop a sustainability plan for the region. And that plan was finished in 2013. We started having a network and trying to implement that plan. And then in 2017, OneSTL hosted a sustainability summit for the region. And as one of the results of that summit, we had working groups established. And these were self-established by the people who were involved. And those working groups had different areas they were looking at, and started to develop targets for the region. But as you can see here, these are the counties that we are included in our plan. And our vision is a prosperous, healthy, and vibrant St. Louis region. So we talk about sustainability, but we want to make sure that sustainability makes sense to everyone who's involved. It's not just about the environment. It's about the quality of life that people have here in the region, our relationships with each other, as well as with the environment. And we want that to be, those relationships to lead us toward prosperity, health, and vibrancy. And that's particularly also important during COVID right now with all of the things that we're experiencing and difficulties that we have. And then also just to see that we're on the Illinois side of the river, not just the St. Louis side of the river. So we work with Madison, St. Clair, and Monroe counties as well.
Hey, Lacey,
Yeah,
are you trying to show slides?
I am.
I'm seeing you, not your screen.
Oh.
I'm seeing Lacey's screen shared. All right. Aaron, I can chat with you in the chat box and we'll try and get you figured out there.
Okay, thanks, BJ.
Okay. So we have so 1STL is the Regional Sustainability Plan and Network. And then as part of 1STL, we offer the Sustainability Lab, which Aaron and BJ have already spoken about. In times where we are not having to do remote learning, we are at T-Rex downtown. But our Sustainability Lab keeps going even in the time of COVID with these virtual sessions. And we have 3 goals for Sustainability Lab. One is that we would have greater regional collaboration across boundaries. So across municipal boundaries, county, state, sector, specialty, ideology boundaries, that we're really getting outside of our silos, learning from each other and collaborating with each other. And that we would have a better use of resources because of crossing those boundaries. So whether that's academic, research, public, or private, that the getting across boundaries would allow us to have new lines of communication, to share plans and ideas, and to partner on grants. Our second goal is to build capacity. So we're doing that through collecting data and developing data, technology, and practices, and particularly focusing on opportunities for youth and young professionals. So opportunities for learning as well as being able to present their work, and for mentorship opportunities as well. And then our third goal is to develop the story of the St. Louis region. So we don't want to just be communicating data and figures and stats that are really interesting and helpful for some people and not that interesting for other people. We want to be telling a story that's really compelling about the region as well. And so we do that through documenting our different networks and collaborations, in enabling relationship building at the labs, and developing common metrics and targets that we can all work toward. So as BJ said, Sustainability Lab happens every final Tuesday of the month, right now virtually, but hopefully at some point again at T-Rex, from 3:45. We usually have 2 different sessions at least, so usually it's from 3:45 to 6:45. And okay, there we go. So I know that Allie's going to touch on this a bit more, but the working groups that we established out of the 2017 summit, there are 6 different working groups that were established that meet regularly. And these are collaborations of people and organizations in the region, quite a few different organizations that are already doing this work, who are then working together to make sure that we are creating good targets and working toward those targets as a region. So we have a materials and recycling group, a biodiversity working group, a food access working group, an energy and emissions working group, a transit-oriented development working group, and a water and green infrastructure working group. And the idea is that these are kind of some buckets that we identified that people were willing to put energy and effort into. These are often overlapping, and there's often things or themes that overlap in between these groups. So looking at social justice in the area, or environmental justice and things like that as well. And then, as I said, the working groups developed regional targets. So these are the targets that we have currently you can actually go on to find out more about these targets and sign on to them at 1stltargets.org. But here are the 6 working group targets, regional targets. Wasting less, so we're wanting to reduce the tons of waste that goes to landfills within our waste shed by 30% by 2030 from a 2015 baseline. As I said, Maggie will help us find some activities to help us connect to this one, and Allie will help us find activities for the next one, increasing biodiversity. So by 2025, having 100% of counties in the metro region of St. Louis that are using the Regional Biodiversity Atlas to actively guide their planning, policies, and practices in ways that increase habitat connectivity, ecological function, and quality of life for all. For access to healthy food by 2027, we will reduce by half the number of healthy food priority areas from a 2018 baseline. And these are areas that meet specific standards like having access to fresh food, regional food, and transportation to those areas, for example. And then our other 3 working targets, our regional targets, are counteracting climate change, so reducing greenhouse gases by 28% by 2025 and 80% by 2050. For transit-oriented development, by 2023, increase the number of destinations like jobs, residences, and other resources within a quarter-mile or 5-minute safe and accessible walk by 30% at 20 stations. So this one's pretty specific. It's got a lot of goals in it, but as we know, our region needs public transportation, but our region is so spread out, and we face some significant barriers to making sure that everyone has access to public transportation. So we're looking at how to develop areas where we can have access to different things in one particular transit development area. And then the final regional target is protecting waterways. So we want to have 100% of land in the St. Louis region with active organizations and quality watershed plans in place by 2025 and the plans completed by 2030. So these targets are being worked on by the working groups, the organizations, and people that are involved in the working groups. And they're also being worked on by individual citizens here in the region. And there are ways that you can get involved and get your students and children involved in these regional targets as well. One of the things that 1STL offers is the ability to make the global local. So if you're aware of sustainable development goals, if you're aware of these global goals, we have based our working groups, our reports and our targets on those goals. And it's a great way to be able to take these global big ideas, these kind of epic visionary goals, and put them in the local level of ways that people can actually contribute to them and see results based upon their contributions. So you can make the global local through the data, through participation, through knowing what local organizations are doing to reach those goals. 1STL also offers the opportunity to learn about local resources and local partners that you can share with your students or your children, or just know about opportunities to get involved locally, as we're finding out today. And then 1STL offers the opportunity to be involved with citizen science by helping to do some research for the working groups on regional targets. As you learn about local resources and partners in the citizen science projects, then you can actually participate in regional programs and campaigns, and our younger students can actually see how their research and how their actions actually contribute to something very tangible in the region. And then we also are always looking for the Sustainability Lab and for the summits to highlight student research, to highlight student projects and presentations. We've had some really great labs focused on research that students have done in the region, particularly around greenhouse gas emissions. And we had some really awesome panels about what high school students were thinking about climate change activism and how they wanted to see adults get involved. So we're always looking to be able to present what our students and our children are doing in sustainability, because this is definitely not something that's just professionals, but we're all involved in different ways. And then finally, we offer opportunities to create mentor relationships with local sustainability professionals whether that's a one-on-one thing you're looking for, or if there's something that you would like to see with having a professional come into your classroom or on video chat or whatever it might be, to be able to get connected with local sustainability professionals who can tell you about their work and their careers. If you're interested, you might get involved. A few of the things that OneSTL offers through the Sustainability Lab and through the working groups. And I have the pleasure of having Maggie here with us. Maggie McCoy can tell us more about particularly how to get involved with the waste and recycling groups work and activities that might help your students be able to apply that to their own lives.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Lacey. So I'm going to talk more specifically about sort of waste and recycling activities that you can do at home. So if you're a parent, these are things you can do at home. And then if you are a teacher who's looking to have some things that students can do at home when they can't be in school, these are some other great things that you can do. Lacey, next slide. So again, I am the Earth Waste Center Education Coordinator. My name is Maggie, and I work a lot with schools, especially on waste and recycling and sort of reducing waste and stuff that goes to landfills. And one of the big reasons that we like to talk about this is it is one of the goals for the region, but we also just use and throw away a lot of stuff. On average in the US, we throw away about 4.5 pounds of waste every day. And in Missouri, that number is even higher. We're closer to 8 pounds a day in Missouri. So there's a lot of work that can be done on this. But one of the really nice things is that this is something that students and families and schools and classrooms touch every single day. So it's a really sort of good, it's a good gateway into sustainability. And it's a really good way for students to take action in a way that really makes sense that they can do every day. Lacey, next slide. So a lot of the time when we talk about sort of waste reduction or recycling or any of these things, we sort of see the 3 R's. We think reduce, reuse, recycle. I've seen 5 R's, I've seen 7 R's. There's a lot of them out there right now, but a lot of times we like to simplify it just to these 3, just to try and look at these steps. And one of the things I like to emphasize about that reduce, reuse, recycle is just talking about that it is an order of importance. So a lot of people really focus on recycling, which is a great thing to focus on, and we will talk about it. But that reducing waste is really sort of the best thing to do, followed by can we reuse any items that we have, and then can we recycle them? Some of those additional R's include repairing, which is a really great skill. So all kinds of things we can do to try that. So one of the things that we want to really empower students to do is for them to be able to figure out what is in their waste and then in their waste stream, and then what they can actually do to change it. So one of the tools we really like to use is a waste audit. So Lacey, next slide. And so this is a picture of some students actually at Brown Elementary in Hazelwood doing a waste audit last fall. So when we go into schools and do this, we have schools decide on kind of what area of the school they want to look at. It could be classrooms, cafeteria, and we actually have them separate everything out into categories and we weigh it, which is really nice in a school because there's hundreds of kids and they're generating a lot of waste. So there's something to actually weigh. If you're translating this to being at home, weighing each individual category of, say, paper or cardboard or recyclable plastic containers or your chip bags is not really practical because we're not really on an individual level generating quite enough for like your home scale to register. So one of the things we suggest if you're at home is to actually sort of track individual items. And what I mean by that is you can have a sheet of paper by your trash can. It's something a student could do where every time they throw something away, they can just make a little mark in sort of what category it belongs in. If you have certain questions about your waste, you can sort of decide on which categories you want. The ones on the screen are the ones that we commonly use, like paper and cardboard, food, recyclable plastic containers, non-recyclable, your recyclable metals, and then glass, and then anything else that doesn't fit into a category. And typically, if you're doing this at home, you could track it for one day, but to get really good data, it's nice to track for a whole week if you can, just so you can kind of see what's actually going into your trash and what it looks like. And then you can sort of decide what you might want to do with that information. Next slide. So this is a process in helping students collect data. And being able to collect and analyze data, if you're a parent or a teacher, is sort of one of these really big skills that we want our students to be able to come away with and our kids to be able to come away with, so that they can think critically about what they're reading and about what they see every day, so that having this data is a really good baseline. I'm one of those people that Lacey might have been talking about earlier. I really like charts and graphs and data tables. So that's how I kind of think. So this data is from Carver Elementary in St. Louis, and their students looked at sort of everything that was coming in their cafeteria and throughout the school, and they made 2 different charts. So it's a really great tool collecting this data in order to teach students how to do basic math skills, but also how to read data charts. So this was one that they made, and I love these kind of charts. But there's other more artistic renderings if you're trying to study data. Next slide. So one of the ones we really like to recommend to people is sort of emulating this Dear Data project. So this was a year-long project that happened between 2 artists who were basically taking a week. They did 52 weeks of them, so over the course of 1 year, and each week they picked something different that they were going to sort of chart or come up with data for, and then they came up with sort of an artistic rendering of it and sent it to each other. Next slide. So for example, in this one, they charted and sort of collected data on all the doors that they walked through for each week. So you can kind of see at the bottom, on the back of the postcard, they wrote out the key, and then on the front, they had all this sort of, these pictures sort of charting which doors that they walked through. And they picked something different every week, but it's a nice way for students to collect data who may not necessarily identify with maybe traditional methods of collecting data, who may be a little bit more artistic, who kind of want to do their own thing. This is a really great way to sort of set up that kind of data collection so that they feel that they can express it in a way that makes sense to them. Next slide. So if you're a teacher or a parent and you're thinking about trying to track your waste or do a waste audit over the course of a week, some questions you can ask yourself and some challenges that you could make might be things like tracking how often you go to throw something away. So maybe you make a little mark for that on your sheet. You might want to track how much of that material is actually recyclable. Could any of it be composted at home? If you already feel like you kind of have recycling and composting down, your question might be, how much of what we use is single-use disposable plastic? And that might be something that you chart. So kind of the data you collect and what it's going to look like kind of depends on what question you're trying to ask. You might be in a family where you're like, I got no idea what's in our trash. I just want to look for a week and see what's there. And then you might be in a family where you know kind of what's going into your trash and you want to ask a more specific question. So that's kind of how you can use those waste audits. And teachers, this is something students can do at home. This is something we can do with families. And then also just establishing rules at the beginning about how you're going to track and visualize your data. So this is a really cool way to sort of collect information about what's happening in your own home. And then once you have that data, you have to learn how to make decisions with it. Next slide. And the one that we really like to use is sort of, we call it our 8-step sort of problem-solving framework. You see 4 here, and there'll be 4 on the next slide. But these 8 steps just kind of walk students through how to sort of carefully think about an issue and then how to make a decision about it and evaluate if it's working. So we like to help walk students through this when we're doing action projects, but it's something that can be done at home too. So we like students to be aware of the problem. So in this case, when we're talking about waste, it's that we generate a lot of waste every day. So we want people to be open to that being the problem and sort of looking into it. The second one is issues. What are some of those issues that are connected to that specific problem, and how do they sort of fit into students' lives? which is again why we like to use waste, because it's something that touches every student's life, since all people probably throw away something each day. Being able to do research on it. How can you find out information related to this problem? And that's one of those things that waste audit can really be useful for, and that data can be hands-on research that students are doing in their own homes. And then looking at players. Who's actually involved in helping us solve this problem? So at a school, we look at people like custodians or maintenance staff, or people who sort of work somewhat behind the scenes at a school that students might not normally interact with. But at home, it might be whoever the adult is in charge, or it could be a student themselves. So you can kind of look at all these people who are sort of part of helping this solution. Next slide. And then once we've kind of identified all those parts, we like students to help think through what the solutions are. And looking at number 5 and 6, solutions and action, they seem similar, but we like to break these up because in step 5, or solutions, we really want students to brainstorm every possible solution. And we really like to slow students down here, because a lot of times, say in schools, a lot of students think about trash and recycling, and their first solution they jump to is, we're going to make signs that are going to go over the recycling bins that tell people what to recycle, and that's what we're going to do. And there's no thought as to what might be other things that could happen that could improve the waste situation in their school. So exploring all the possibilities and listing all of them, no matter how silly or crazy they may seem, but listing everything out. And then in step 6, looking at who your players are, what kind of solutions you listed, kind of what your data is, and figuring out which one of those possible solutions is going to be the one that you actually want to take, and then actually taking action on it. So that's step 6. Assessment is, did it work? So you want to kind of figure out, what are you going to measure after you try your solution, and how are you going to see if it works? And then evaluation is just seeing, is it long-term going to work? Was it a success? Are there other things we can change to make it better? So we like to help walk students through that framework. Next slide. If you have younger students, 8 steps is an awful lot. So if you have younger students that you work with, or younger kids at home, you can break it up just into 3 steps. So just understanding the problem, taking action, and then evaluating and reflecting on whether that action worked, which is a really good way to look at those steps just sort of in a smaller framework. So the action you take is really going to depend on what you find in your data. So next slide. So after your waste audit, you may look at everything that's in your trash at home, or your students may look at what's in their trash at home, or even at school. And you might see that you really didn't have that much that could be recycled in your waste stream. So maybe what you really want to look at is reducing the amount of waste you're making. So like we had a school that we worked with this year who saw that in their cafeteria waste, is they saw that not a lot of it was recyclable. So the next thing they had to do was looking at, how can we actually reduce the amount of waste we're putting in here? What are the items that we don't really need to be throwing away, or that we could replace with reusable items? So it's all going to kind of depend on what you find in your waste stream. You might look in your waste stream and you might see there's lots of things that we could reuse. So like we've had schools just this past year who created a reuse it station, where students were able to bring in things from home, or things that they didn't use in their classroom, and actually sort of create a maker space that a lot of these students could use in art projects. And that was for a first grade classroom that put that together. At Carver Elementary, some of those art pieces that you see on the slide were actually created by their students. So being able to come up with creative ways to reuse different items is another way that you can sort of reduce what actually goes to the landfill. Next slide. But if you've kind of looked at what you can reduce and what you can reuse, and you've made your steps there, knowing how to recycle is another really big step that you can take in your school and in your own home. So this is sort of the messaging that the materials working group has put out about recycling, which is our stick with the 6, right? So if you go through your waste audit and you see paper in there, or you see cardboard, or you see metal cans, that's the stuff that you want to say, well, maybe we need to just learn how to recycle better in this area, and message really well about it. So in your own home, just figuring out, can we, do we need to put the recycling bin somewhere else? Do we need to get a recycling bin? And then in school, sort of figuring out what do we need to do in order to get people to recycle better. So these are the big 6 things that in the St. Louis region we can recycle. If you have other items that you'd really like to recycle, you can check out stlcityrecycles.com, and they have a wonderful database. And that's sort of grown out of this One STL group as well, that lists all types of materials and how you can recycle them and where you can take them. So there's lots of options if you're looking to recycle items that you can't quite reduce or reuse. Next slide. And then you might get through your whole waste audit and you might find that you have a lot of food waste left over or a lot of organics. So the first question you want to ask yourself at that point is, what kind is it and why is it there, right? If you're throwing away food that could have been eaten, but maybe you just didn't get to it, or maybe it's spoiled first, you might want to be looking at, are you overbuying? Are you buying fresh things, but it's taking too long to use them? So first you kind of want to look at that reducing part of things. But the next part you might ask yourself is, well, is there a compost method that could work for me? Especially at home, it's easier to do sort of like these small scale recycling or composting projects and get all your food waste in there. And there's a ton of composting options. And if you're sort of a parent at home who's trying to teach, or a teacher who's teaching this upcoming year, composting is a great way to not only look at sustainability, but also to look at biology and systems. It's a really great tool to use to cover a lot of different parts of sort of science and math and these other interrelated fields. So looking at what next slide. And then I'm almost done with my stuff here. So if after you kind of do all that, you still need some more ideas, or you kind of want to be walked through some of that process, Earth Waste Center is one of the places that provides waste reduction classes for free if you're in St. Louis City County, St. Charles County, or Jefferson County, and that's through funding from the Solid Waste Management District in the area. Depending on what county you're in, there's a local place that might be able to help you with some of that education too. So St. Louis County Department of Health does their sort of waste reduction classes in St. Louis City. St. Louis City Recycles and Brightside are the ones that do waste reduction classes for city schools and sort of around the city. And then Madison County over in Illinois does a lot of this work too. So wherever you are in this greater region, there's somebody that can help answer questions about how you can reduce waste, whether you're a teacher or a parent in your home. And if you really have additional questions, that's my email there. Even though we can't go to schools this year, or at least in the fall, we will still be virtual. So you can always call us up if you have a homeschool group or a group that you're working with virtually, or if you're a teacher in a classroom and you want us to call in and talk to your students about recycling or talk them through looking at their own waste, that's something we can certainly help you with. And so that's everything I have. So I'm going to hand it back over to Lacey.
Thanks, Maggie. So Maggie told us of some really great activities that we can do at home. And I'm going to try right now to share Allie's video with us, you all. It's an 8-minute video on biodiversity and what you can do with biodiversity. So let's see if this works.
Hi everyone, my name is Allie Brown and I am the Community Programs Coordinator at Missouri Botanical Garden. I am also a member on the Biodiversity Working Group for One STL, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about biodiversity and what you can be doing at home. So the first thing I wanted to do was introduce this project that you may or may not have heard of. So this is Biome St. Louis, which is just shorthand for the Biodiversity of Metropolitan St. Louis. It's the official name for our regional vision, atlas, and action plan. So multiple partner organizations have been contributing their data, their time, their expertise, their insight, and their ideas to advance this very simple but powerful concept of how we can connect these disconnected, fragmented regions through nature. So here are some of the partners that we've been working with. So these are all contributing partners, but we have over 100 different partners that are helping out on this project. So another contributing piece of this puzzle was the 1STL Sustainability Plan. So the 1STL Sustainability Plan, you may know a little bit about it, was developed through a 3-year collaborative process led by East-West Gateway Council of Governments. Basically, it provides this framework for sustainable development that citizens, nonprofit organizations, businesses, and local governments can use to make better use of resources and meet the needs of their communities. So this is powered in part by these working groups. So obviously I am working with the Biodiversity Working Group. And our target that we developed was that by 2025, 100% of the counties in the combined statistical area, metropolitan area of St. Louis, will be using this regional biodiversity vision, atlas, and action plan to actively guide their planning, policies, and practices to increase habitat connectivity, ecological functionality, and quality of life for all. So from this idea came the idea of Biome St. Louis. So this is inspired by our natural assets like our rivers, our streams, our creeks, our forests, our wetlands, prairies, woodlands, you name it. We have lots of different types of environments in our region, and we really want to highlight those. It's also informed by science and data as well as best management practices. As you saw on the previous slide, we have a lot of partners that have all kinds of data and great best management practices that they have developed throughout these years. So we're not trying to recreate what's already happening. We're just trying to connect those resources in one place. It's also powered by the network of organizations, and it's activated by citizens and communities. So our goal is really to shift the view of our region past these geopolitical county boundaries, so these built roads, these lines that we see on this map, and focus more on our natural assets. So this is a map of the combined statistical area of St. Louis, but so is this. And so we want to look at our watersheds, our ecoregions, our threatened and endangered species. So these conservation areas of concern. So for this project, we have 2 different working groups, or user groups, sorry. And the first user group would be those city and county decision makers. So our goal is to educate and inform the people who are actually making these land use decisions on a daily basis, and for them to have a view of our region through an ecological mindset so that they can see the value of our local landscapes and center these decisions around protecting those valuable places. So it's not just about land saving, meaning that we are protecting these significant tracts of land, but it's also about land sharing, meaning that we can invite nature back into our built environment in places like subdivisions and schools and shopping centers and city streets. So green roofs, opting to plant native landscape instead of turf grass in your front yard, creating microhabitats. These are all examples of ways that we can use the land sharing concept. And we can incorporate these ideas of land sharing and land saving in the development of our region. So these can both be economically and ecologically vibrant places. So you may be thinking, this is a great project, but where do I fit in? I'm not making decisions on a county-wide level in my day-to-day life, but what we need from you is to be active in this. So our second user group is everyone, citizens and community groups. We hope that this Atlas Vision and Action Plan can help to unite the 2.9 million people that live within the St. Louis metropolitan statistical area to gain a greater appreciation for these natural assets and the place that they live and work and play. So these community groups have been working on local conservation issues for years, but what we're trying to do is serve as a common platform for this data, and these volunteer opportunities and events can all be found in one place. To better inform our own understanding of the biodiversity that's in our own backyard. So we're still in the pilot stage of making this atlas accessible to everyone. We're working on figuring out where it's going to live and how it's going to work. But in the meantime, you can still help us out with the development of this by partaking in citizen science. So in addition to being a vision for a region more connected by nature with a best practices guide, it's also a citizen science project. So we utilize iNaturalist, which is an online social network of people sharing biodiversity information to help each other learn about nature. So by using this, we can actually all contribute to the data that's being collected in our region. You can use it to record your own observations, get help with identifications, collaborate with others to collect different kinds of information for a common purpose, or you can access the observational data that has already been collected by iNaturalist users. So we've actually created a project on iNaturalist already so that all of the observations that are made within our boundary that we've set will automatically be updated into our Biome St. Louis project. So if you go out today, you take your smartphone, you take a picture of a purple coneflower, that's automatically going to show up in the atlas. So that's great. If you're interested in learning more about iNaturalist, you can actually check out the OneSTL Facebook page. There was a webinar back in April about iNaturalist led by Mike Dawson of the St. Louis Zoo. And it's a really in-depth, great tutorial on how to get started if you're new to iNaturalist. So here's our project on iNaturalist. You can find it by just typing in Biome St. Louis. And you can see the different observations that were made within this area. And so here is a map of the kind of metropolitan downtown area of St. Louis, and you can see all these different points on here at different observations. And if we zoom out, these are all the observations that were actually made last year during our 2019 St. Louis City Nature Challenge. So we had almost 14,000 observations last year. So speaking of the City Nature Challenge, it's not going to be happening again until 2021. But basically, the City Nature Challenge is something that happens the last weekend in April, and it's a global competition for cities around the world to compete using the iNaturalist platform to see who can log the most observations within one weekend. So we actually just wrapped up the 2020 City Nature Challenge. Unfortunately, it was impacted a little by COVID, but we still got some really great data, some great results. A lot of you went out and made tons of observations, so it was very successful, but keep an eye out for the 2021 City Nature Challenge and get out and use iNaturalist. Thanks so much and have a great day.
So thanks to Allison Brown for that video and the slide presentation she put together that she unfortunately very last minute joined us, but was able to join us virtually. If you have questions for her, her email address is in the chat as well. And then finally, before we get to questions, I wanted to tell you about a couple other resources. If you are an educator or a parent and would like to know more about how to make your school or your student's school green, U.S. Green Building Council Missouri Gateway Chapter offers a couple of free resources along with Missouri Environmental Educators Association. And so I just want to tell you about those two programs. So both these programs are free and available to support local schools as they journey toward creating greener and healthier learning communities. And not just about the building and grounds, it's also about the people and the education there. And so that definition includes 3 pillars of what a green school is that are used by over 60 organizations in the United States and abroad. And those pillars are reduced environmental impact and costs, improved health and wellness of students and staff, and effective environmental and sustainability education. And I think the captions there got messed up. That's supposed to be sustainability literacy on there. And then these are brought to life by a framework that looks at a school's physical place, the education of a school, and the culture of a school. And so green schools incorporate all of these aspects when they're thinking about what makes a school or an education space sustainable. There are several benefits to green schools. You can see several here. One is, as Maggie was talking about, just with the activities that she was talking about, that if you have a systemic approach to solving real world problems, green schools look at all of these different factors and see them as connected in order to be able to find solutions and be able to make positive changes. And they allow for multiple entry points into the idea of sustainability and big issues that we face in the world today. Of course, they increase student engagement, civic engagement, and student empowerment. And obviously, most green school initiatives end up saving money for schools. There can be gains in academic achievement and engagement, increased teacher satisfaction, improved student and staff health, including social and emotional well-being and not just physical well-being, and connections to the community. And particularly with Green Schools Quest, there's some really great opportunities to get involved with local organizations who can make a big difference in your school. So Green Schools Quest it happens yearly, and there's actually a cash prize for the winners of the contest. It's project-based, and there's a 6-month time frame for getting your project done and being able to submit it for inclusion. The idea is that these projects are driven by student interests and student research, and that they're very low cost or no cost at all for the schools. So each school that participates gets assigned a mentor to help them with their sustainability project, to help them with documentation and getting connected to community resources. And there's a point person in the school, which is usually a teacher, but can also be an administrator or a paraprofessional as well. You can go to the website to find out more about Green Schools Quest. It's a really cool program. It's really exciting to see the project schools come up with. Is probably going to be a little bit different this year because everything's going to be a little bit different this year. So you can also find updates. Or if you would be interested, say you're a parent at a school or a local professional who would like to get involved, we're always looking for mentors to help out helping schools achieve their sustainability objectives. And there's lots of cool resources there for ways to green your school and project ideas. And then Missouri Green Schools is a collaboration of several organizations. It's co-managed by the USGBC Missouri Gateway Chapter and the Missouri Environmental Education Association, and with support from the organizations here. It's a much longer type program. It's not project-based. It's an ongoing program to have your school become more green, and it's for pre-K through 12 schools in Missouri. Right now, it's a free program. Right now, schools in Kansas City area aren't included just because of the funding for that, but we're hoping to change that. But most everywhere else in Missouri is. And there's a tracking tool that helps schools be able to track their changes over time and what their goals might be. We are also expanding Missouri Green Schools right now. So schools with 60% or more free and reduced price lunch programs have the opportunity to get additional support through Missouri Green Schools. That's what I want to support, to set goals and track progress, and financial support for staff professional development. So at this time, schools in Kansas City and Northwest Missouri aren't eligible, but again, hoping that will change. But this is a really cool program if you'd like to know more. If you'd like to know more about either of these programs and what they're looking like in this time period, with all the adaptations that we're making for schools right now, you can contact Hope Gribble, who's the Education and Green Schools Manager at Missouri Gateway Chapter USGBC, and her information's right there. So those are all of our resources and suggestions for you. Now we'd love to hear if you have any questions or resources or suggestions that you would like to put out to the group as well.
Hey, Lacey, this is Aaron. If Bailey is still online, I would like to give her an opportunity to talk about what they're doing in Madison County with their green schools.
Great.
You still online, Bailey? Let me see if I can unmute her. Hey, BJ, can we unmute participants?
Yeah, I sent her a message. I have to ask her to unmute. I can't just go in and turn her microphone on. But it sounds like she may be away from her computer.
Okay. Well, when Bailey comes back, maybe we'll get her again. I'll send her a message. There's the Madison County in Illinois has a program for greening their school, so I would like her to talk briefly about that. Before we open it up, I would like to exercise my role as a host and ask the first question. It's for Maggie. When she was talking about the phases of engagement with students, and I was wondering about the first phase when you're doing issue exploration. How much of that do you leave completely open versus having to guide very young students into understanding what is actually a problem or an issue?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I wanted to let you know that Bailey doesn't have audio at the moment, so that's why she's not speaking. So when she gets it, she'll come back in. But are you talking about waste specifically or any sustainability issue?
Anything. You said you just talk to students about identifying issues. I was wondering if you go in with waste, or do you take a more open approach?
It does depend on school. So I will say that a lot of schools that participate, their teachers have already sort of identified a realm of what they're going to do, depending on the age of the student. So they might say, like, we want to do a waste reduction project, but they don't necessarily specify that it has to be something with recycling or composting or something like that. So some schools might have it more open, especially with schools that do, say, like the Green Schools Quest that do a cycle similar to this. They might, especially with older students, have it be more open, especially if it's like an environmental club. So I'd say it definitely depends on the age of the student. When I work with younger students, I like to give them maybe more of like a range of things they can look at. So maybe just focus on waste or just focus on energy or water, just to sort of narrow things, because I think it's a little bit harder at that age to narrow a project down. Whereas for older students, I think there's more capacity to look at a wide range of issues and then sort of decide on one.
Okay. Great. If you have, we're not sure if you can unmute or not. If you have any questions and are having problems with your audio, please type your questions into the chat.
Nick has a good question he was asking about the Green Ribbon School program. And so, yeah, Nick, actually the Missouri Green Schools program is a feeder into the Green Ribbon School program. So it actually is like a way to help schools get to Green Ribbon status. For those of you who don't know, Green Ribbon Schools is a federal program for green schools, and states have to opt into doing that, but then you can have, I can't remember, Nick, you might know, 3 or 5 schools a year that can actually be recognized as green schools, and then that's a status that stays with you. And so the idea with Missouri Green Schools is that we would be helping schools kind of get to that point, because it's usually a multi-year process. There's a lot that's considered in that process. And so particularly with the START tool, it's allowing schools to be able to keep recording their data and their achievements over time, so that they can reach the Missouri Green School status and also reach the Green Ribbon School status too.
Thank you. I don't know a whole lot about that program, so I was just, it's good to hear a little bit more. Our children are in a Green Ribbon school, and I know that's a good thing, but I didn't know how complicated the process was.
Yeah, it's a great program. The one thing about Green Ribbon Schools now is, like I said, once you're recognized, that's kind of it. Like, there's no like staying with it. And the idea with Missouri Green Schools is that we would kind of help schools continue along that spectrum, but also to keep going after they've reached that status, to be able to also be champions and mentors to other schools who are going through that program as well.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Aaron, this is Bailey. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi Bailey.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. I had some audio issues on my end, but I can just add a few things for the Illinois side if there's anybody in Madison County that's tuned in right now. So our Green Schools program, we are entering our 30th year, which is very exciting. So our program typically works with teachers and educators that serve as coordinators at each of the schools, and we provide incentive, support, and resources to new and ongoing resource management practices within county schools, and that's both private and public. Like Lacey and Maggie mentioned, our programs are all going to look a little bit different this year. So like you all, we are still kind of figuring things out here in Madison County and how that's going to change and how that's going to look for this year. But we are getting things ready for teachers and for students to enroll, and we're still kind of figuring out what that program is going to look like. But we do have resources. We work pretty closely with the Environmental Education Association of Illinois. I've joined that program, that state organization. So we're kind of working to distribute those resources and get that information out for teachers and for parents who will be educating their students at home. One last thing I want to add, I did serve, Maggie mentioned the Green Schools Quest. I've served as a mentor with that program for 2 years now. Previously, when I worked for St. Louis County, I served as a mentor there working with Brown Elementary, and it is a really great opportunity to get involved and to see the projects that the students are working on. So I know it's going to look a little bit different this year, but it is a really great thing to be involved with. If anybody is interested, I highly recommend it. And I put my contact information in the chat if anybody has any questions, or we have our Green Schools program website as well. You can visit. We're pretty good about updating that and making sure all the resources and everything are readily available.
We also, I know Jacqueline's on the call, and she's also a Green Schools Quest mentor. So that's
Great.
been a great connection to have people as part of the One STL network get involved with Green Schools Quest and back and forth. Aaron, you're muted.
Thanks, Lacey. Well, if we don't have any other questions, did you see any others in the chat that I missed?
I did not.
Well, thank you, Lacey and Maggie and BJ and Anna for hosting. If you have any other questions about Green Schools and information that you want to give to students, feel free to email me and I can put you in touch with anyone that may be of assistance, and we can make our schools part of our regional effort. Any closing statements, Lacey or Maggie?
I would just say that as a member of the One STL network, I help plan the sustainability labs, and we're always looking for content that's interesting and relevant to everyone. So if anyone on this call has ideas for things that you would like to see in the future, we're always looking for those suggestions as well. So reach out to Aaron. Reach out to Aaron. You can reach out to me too if you have ideas or suggestions. And thanks to Maggie for presenting today.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And Lacey and Maggie.
Have a great day, everybody.
You too.